99.9 Punk World Radio FM. You already know what time it is. Tonight we got a Canadian legend. He also won a Juno as well. We have the phenomenal, the one, the only. We got Siegfried right here live on the air. And of course, Facebook, YouTube. Everyone here is watching, knows the drill. Siegfried, how you doing tonight, man, out there in the GTA, if I'm not mistaken? I think you're out there in Toronto,
I'm
right?
a couple hours west of Toronto. So, I mean, but it might as well be the GTA. I'm close enough when we're in Toronto weekly for sure. But it might as well. So, yes.
Yeah, Toronto's a big place, man, especially when it comes to driving. I mean, some driving isn't that bad in Toronto. I will say that. I prefer driving in Toronto versus Ottawa, and I live in Ottawa. So, you know.
I will disagree. I can't stand driving Toronto. I will drive in Los Angeles long before I will drive in Toronto. But we do it anyway because we deal with it.
Because I do know, like, in your career, you lived out in Los Angeles as well, man. So, like, obviously, you've lived in both places, so definitely you can say which one. But I've heard Los Angeles traffic is ridiculous.
I don't think so. I think it can get crazy, but the thing is, it flows. In Toronto, it's like they're just always doing construction or there's something crazy happening, and you're just like stopped for like ever. You know, so that's the only difference. I think maybe the roadways are a little bit more logical. That being said, I think they have done a report, and some of those sections of the 401 see more traffic daily than potentially even Los Angeles. So there may actually be more vehicles passing through. Plus, there's like 8 lanes sometimes in some of those sections. It's the Collector, the Express. There's way more lanes, and it's actually way crazier in Toronto. I would hate to be a new driver in that city today. That's all I got to say.
I remember the first time actually experiencing, like, driving to Toronto with the 8 lanes. I almost had a panic attack, man. I was like, because I'm a small town boy. I'm used to maybe 2 lanes, if that. So when I see 8, I'm just like, holy, I can't do this.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of rules, and you can't cross here, and you know, and then there's those hub lanes, and anyways, it's crazy. It's crazy.
And to summarize it, all you have to say is those rules. You just get a person with a Quebec license plate and a Quebecer in the car, and those rules don't apply anymore.
I wish that was true. Definitely.
But Siegfried, before all the crazy traffic, I got to take you way back to the year 1994, 31 years ago, where you co-founded the Toronto, Ontario punk rock band called Curtis. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us the story behind the formation of this band, and of course, how did you actually meet the other members way back in the mid 1990s?
Yeah, so I had moved. So we're actually technically Stratford based, which is maybe about an hour and a half west of Toronto. It's sort of in the middle of here and Toronto. But I was in high school, and so I had moved. I'd moved there in '93, and I met the other guys in the band around that time. I think we were going into grade 11 at that time. And yeah, we were just kids, man. Like, we're just young kids playing like a weird mixture of like Nirvana and like 80s hair metal, like pretty much, because I mean, I was the youngest of 4 kids, so I was heavily influenced by my older siblings, you know, with whatever they were listening to. And that could have been like, you know, that would have been like Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and like Van Halen and like Metal Church and like Queensryche and Led Zeppelin. And like, it was just a mishmash of things. And I think the 3 of us, when we first started that band, which wasn't called Curtis in the early days, we went through a couple of different names, terrible names. One of the coolest names was Freeloader, but we had to change it because there were other bands that were threatening us with lawsuits on our name. So we ended up with the Curtis. But I think all of us had such eclectic styles of, you know, genres that we had in our back pockets that once we kind of got together, it kind of made our own thing, even though it took a few years to develop, you know.
And I got to say, I listened to the catalog. You guys had a phenomenal music. And one of the albums that actually really caught my eye that I thoroughly enjoyed was released just 4 years after the formation on New Year's Eve, 1998, which is a 9-track album called Thanks Stu. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us a bit more about this album. And of course, where can we actually purchase ourselves a copy? I know where it's streamed, but can you still physically buy the CDs today if they are still available?
Normally you wouldn't be able to, but I actually still have a few boxes of the first 2 albums on CD in storage here. So you could purchase it directly through me, through mail order if you wanted to. But we back in those days, like you had to do like a minimum run of 500 discs for like proper duplication. And so we did 500 records of those first 2 albums. And we probably went through like a good, I'd say 3/4 of them in those days, which, isn't a lot, but it's enough that people there are humans out there with physical copies of this. And the stuff that you hear on streaming, of course, was remastered a number of years ago for streaming formats. I feel like I actually want to remaster those yet again, or maybe even go back and remix those old records. But they were a moment in time. And you asked about like that album specifically. I was really getting heavily into production at that time. And so that was the first time that we take for granted some of the equipment that we have today because everyone's got a laptop and, maybe some people even have a more complicated setup. But in those days, for you to have like a 16-channel mixer or console and even an 8-track reel-to-reel or an 8-track digital tape machine, you were probably considered rather well off, not just as a musician, but even as an individual. And so that record specifically was the first time I was able to do an album of ours that was on 8 tracks, physically 8 tracks. And so the production from the previous record, it was markedly like better. We were able to double the guitars properly. We were able to have some backup vocals. We spent a good deal of time tracking and we spent a good deal of time mixing that record. And at the time I'm still pretty proud of that album considering the technical limitations of the era, so. But I think as like a band, our songwriting had really evolved throughout those years, those 4 years that we were kind of honing our skills. And that was sort of like the pinnacle. Sadly, we kind of stopped shortly after that because I attended a recording college and then really started taking this part of my career quite seriously. And even though the band technically never broke up, we were still released singles. We released a live album at some point. And, we're still technically together,
So you're telling me there could be a possibility. I know this was almost 30 years ago, but there is still a chance that we might get Curtis back. Because a lot of punk bands that kind of either split up or went their separate ways are kind of resurfacing and getting back together. Do you think there's a chance for the band to actually? I know you said you guys didn't break up, but kind of resurface and have Curtis come back.
We got busy, right? Everyone had like families and lives, and I had a cat, and I had and a career as well. But truthfully, we do actually have a bunch of songs that were never finished sitting on the hard drives that could come out. We even were playing shows up until we kind of started playing shows again in 2012. We did a bunch in 13 and then 14. I think maybe summer of 14 was our last show that we kind of. So that's already been 11 years, right? So time marches on pretty quick for all of us. But yeah, technically the band is still. We could still be playing shows at some point, Yeah, sky's the limit. I have no idea. But I definitely have songs that were never finished that were under the Curtis moniker that I think should still. They're still punk rock, so I think it only makes sense to put them out as that.
And also in the same year, I know you just briefly mentioned this a few moments ago, but you pursued a musical degree at Ontario Institute of Recording Technology. And upon graduation as well, you also became a professor at that institute. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us a bit more about that experience. And of course, how did you ultimately land that teaching role after graduating? Because I do know a lot of professors do tend to go on to teach as well in their field. But you're Juno Award winning. I know this was before the Junos, but you're very talented at what you do. So they definitely saw what they saw and brought you on.
Yeah. So there's a thing that the school does. They hire on 3 or 4 interns every year from the previous year to sort of help out with labs and that sort of thing. So initially I was hired on as an audio intern to teach the following year's labs to the students. So these labs are practical labs. You've got 4 students, 1 instructor, and they have 3 or 4 hour labs, and they go through and they do their practical work, getting hands-on kind of stuff at the institution there. So I did that for the year, and then I went on to do other things. In the meantime, I got a job at a recording studio in London. But it wasn't until 2004 I was doing some third term advanced, Pro Tools editing stuff, some vocal tuning stuff. And they had asked me in 2004 to teach their Pro Tools program, which At that time, I had a lot of years under my belt, and I was pretty good at it, and it was a no-brainer really for that sort of a thing. So I did that for a couple of years as like a full-time sort of thing, writing and developing that course. I went on to do it for third term for them, so just sort of advanced stuff again for probably the remainder of the decade until around 2010. In the meantime, I built Beach Road Studios in 2006, so this was really my focus here. But then I actually came back a couple of years ago and wrote their production course, developed it for a couple of years, and again now I'm just full time at the studio. So I've really had like a good 20 plus year sort of history with the school, and it's just kind of been ongoing. And of course we do recording workshops here at the studio as well. I've hosted many of those in the past 13 or 14 years. I've done some online content. So I think education has always been a huge part of my life as well. I think it's really important for me to give back to the community. I've been given so much from so many producers and engineers and musicians over the years, and it's just a no-brainer for me to give back, you know.
And I got to say, schools like that definitely need dedicated individuals like yourself. There's some professors. Currently, me, I'm in my 30s, but I'm going to college currently right now, and I will say there's some amazing professors. And then there's some that kind of don't really care per se, but I will say it's good to know that there is still amazing professors like yourself out there that really do still care about the arts and crafts of what they do.
I think it's important to have passion, of course. It's important to have a great understanding of the actual field that you're discussing. And the passion goes along with that. But historical knowledge is really, really key as well, because, I mean, especially within the music industry and the technology, like, yes, so much has changed. But it's not like you're going to be able to teach some of these plugins without having a little bit of a background as to where they came from, because the majority of them were originally a piece of hardware that's now been emulated, you know, to do something. So you don't really know what to use in certain situations if you don't understand the historical importance of it. I think that's what it comes down to. So I think passion is a huge part of it, and it's possible that some instructors maybe lack a little bit of that, and maybe it's just a day job for them, or, you know, whatever it happens to be.
And going into some of your producer work, I do know you had the opportunity to work on many different movie soundtracks, but one of them most notably that actually made a big impact within the punk rock community was in 2004. You had the opportunity to be an assistant engineer for the Euro Trip movie soundtrack that had one of the most iconic songs to this day. And speaking of that song, Lustra, Scotty Doesn't Know, when you first heard that as the assistant engineer, what was your thoughts and opinions of that song when you first heard it?
That song specifically, I wasn't involved with. I was only involved on the Salad, which was the closing credit song. Get Loose was the song. So I don't know too much about the Scotty Doesn't Know song, although I do enjoy it. It's quite fun. There's a lot of people have worked on the songs for many of those soundtracks, and you know, I was just a small part of, you know, a certain section of that. So yeah, I can't speak too much about that song specifically.
Because I will say, I do know that song completely was left field. I mean, even I even see stuff on the internet today where people actually say that Lustra wasn't a real band, and they did it. There was just a made up band for the movie, and I'm sitting there scratching my head like, no, like these guys are real. Like, they're a real band. Like, people actually think Matt Damon was in like a made up band, and I'm like, no. Like, I tell people, like, no, they're a legit band.
Well, and that's a funny movie too, because I mean, I don't think that movie could come out today, because I think it's a little too politically correct to allow something like that. But, you know, it's nice that it's still out there. It's still being enjoyed, and the music is still being enjoyed, of course, by many. And that's the great thing about art and making albums and all that, because we're essentially we're creating something for the future for people of all generations to hopefully enjoy. And that's any art, really. I mean, that's really the only reason we make art. It's not like you're not creating something in the hopes that it's just going to get thrown in the trash and no one's ever going to hear about it again. Just like no one builds a house because they expect someone to burn it down and it'll never be seen again or enjoyed or lived in. It's the same thing, you know. It's art is there to be enjoyed.
And as you already mentioned, you created your own studio called Beach Road Studios that was originally crafted by the help of a fellow professor at the school as well, Lee Weil. I was wondering, what ultimately made you decide to start Beach Road originally? And of course, how can fellow musicians or bands that are watching right now potentially book some studio time?
Well, in order to book, you just go to my website and you fill out the email thing at the contact page. So that's pretty easy. We do handle some of our own booking here. I do have an assistant that helps me with some of that. So that's pretty easy that way. But in terms of the actual studio, I mean, I think I've been dreaming of having some sort of a facility well into, probably the mid 80s, when I was just a little kid, really, like 7, 8 years old. And, seeing pictures of recording studios in like Hit Parade or magazines and, other metal magazines of that time. I was young, but again, I was the youngest of 4 kids. And I think just like seeing liner notes and like doing as much research as I could long before the internet existed, and recognizing that musicians had these sort of, churches, in a sense, these places to go to create. And, it's just a magical place that emotion just comes out of the walls, and so I think it was always an intention of mine to sort of eventually have some sort of a space. In the early to mid 90s, I used to set up, little makeshift studios in homes and things, but it never quite scratched that itch of like having a real facility. And we were lucky in the mid 90s to work with a couple of great people who had pretty decent facilities for the time. But I definitely took, in 2006, when I built this place, I took inspiration from, Dark Horse Studios in Nashville, the Chalet north of Toronto, of course, Le Studio Morin Heights, Air Studios Montserrat, which was a legendary place that George Martin had. And a lot of these places, the thing they had in common was they were away from the city. They were sort of a destination recording studio where the artist would also live. There'd be a residence for them. And they could just really spend time and create, not be on any sort of a time restriction. Nobody looks at the clock here. If I book 2 weeks, 2 weeks is usually a long time for us to make an album, 2-3 weeks, and nobody's rushing to get anything finished. No one's worrying about, making that extra buck kind of thing, and that's just always what I envisioned, because that's how I wanted to work as a musician, and that's why I started building my own little makeshift studios in those days, because I hated watching the clock too. I wanted to just keep working until it was right, until everything sounded the way it needed to. So that was definitely the inspiration for me, in the beginning.
And I will definitely say, I'm not just going to say this to you because you're here live on my station, but we need in the music industry more producers like yourself that aren't clock watchers, that really care about the artist, man. Obviously, you got bills to pay, so of course that's why the fees on those services are on the website. But the fact that you don't watch the clock and you really want these artists to be able to take their time and really put their passion into their music, man, we need more producers and studios like you, man, because that's what the music industry is all about.
I think a lot of people have forgotten, what a recording studio is for. And some people might have even forgotten what the original definition of a record producer was, and these days, of course, AI is all the rage and everyone's creating stuff with that, and Juno and plugins, and, and that stuff has existed for a long time. There's been chord packs and there's been, splice and like all sorts of things. And AI has really just scraped all of that and just made it really simple to create things. And I think people will slowly tire of that if they aren't already tired of it. And they'll realize that it really just comes down to just a number of people in the same room together creating something that's brand new. That's a whole new vibe, and that's everyone feeding off each other and create something that hasn't been created before. And that's really the downfall of AI, because it's just rehashing stuff that's already been made, that's already existed. It can't really create anything totally original and new. And so, yeah, I mean, this is all I know. So, I'm still going to keep doing this as long as I can, obviously. And I love hosting clients here. I mean, these days I'm doing a lot more mixing and sort of co-production, because a lot of people are working at home. They're maybe tracking stuff in various ways. Maybe they've got a little bit of gear and they might come in to do a drum session for a couple of days for an album, and then they go home and do the rest of the guitars. And, they might want to do vocals with me and then have me mix, so it's nice to be able to, provide various services for clients that they might need, and I'm all for, bands and clients recording stuff in their own home studios after all, that's how I started. And I totally get why anyone would want to do that and not want someone over their shoulders. And they want to just, some people actually even sing better when they're at their home space with nobody around them. And, and sometimes I'll work with clients like that and they just do a bunch of takes of vocals to their heart's content. When they're, when they're happy with it, they send it off to me and I edit and pick through and decide what I think is maybe some of the best parts. And, those are true co-productions. And really every album I've ever worked on has been a co-production, because there's no band or client that literally just says, do whatever you want to do. I don't care. Let's just get it done. Like, everyone's involved in some way. So really every artist is a co-producer,
And also Carter Zinn just chimed in here on the YouTube and said I've worked with Zig a couple times at Beach Road. Musician's heaven, as he says.
There's a few things here. There's some toys for sure. So yeah,
I think a few is an understatement. But hey, you know what? If you have a studio, you got to have lots of toys to make sure you get that job done correctly.
And keep in mind that I'm also in the middle of nowhere, so rentals would be difficult. Most of the things that we would want to rent for an album are about 2.5 or 3 hours away drive. So you get there and you got to come back. So it's a 6-hour drive, right? So over those years, a lot of times an album is booked and I know the artist wants a specific tool or a specific toy or something. And I'll usually build it into the budget that we have it, and really most of those things just stayed. It's like a good carpenter with a very specialized saw. They might only use it once every 3 or 4 years, but when they need it, it's there and ready to go. And that's kind of how I look at all this gear,
And one of the other great toys that you have, and unfortunately you definitely can't see this one behind you, but you also have a studio on wheels called the Mix Bus. I was wondering if you can actually tell us a bit more about that business venture and what ultimately inspired you to create a studio on wheels.
So that actually was born out of when I first sort of moved full-time to Los Angeles in 2016. I was talking to a friend of mine. He's the drummer from Goldfinger, Darren Pfeiffer. And I was looking for a place to stay. And I was staying on his couch for a while. And I kind of half made a joke like, why don't I just get a van? And then I've got a place to stay. I've got a vehicle. I can drive anywhere. Because I was actually renting cars down there. I was spending quite a bit of money on all the things that one needs when they move to a place like that. And I thought, well, just get a van. And it was a half joke, but sort of half serious. I didn't really see anyone doing like proper van builds. It wasn't until a couple of years after that I started to see, Mercedes Sprinters that were long and tall being decked out as business offices and homes. And I hadn't really seen any full recording studios, but by the time the pandemic hit, I had actually already put money down on a used Sprinter that I found locally, which was a good thing because once the pandemic hit, all that stuff skyrocketed. So I was already planning this sort of device that I could travel with, and it would be a home, and there's a little recording studio in it with Ethernet cables and a snake that runs out to the band's space. And yeah, I just thought it was a really cool way to bring me to the client, but also be able to utilize really interesting spaces for recording that I wouldn't normally have access to. And it's not like it's hard to bring a couple of pieces of gear, but then you're always sort of in the same space. You got to have headphones. You got to sort of always be closed in. And the way I'm able to work in the bus is I can be literally 300 feet away, and the bus itself acts as a really, really isolated control room. So I can actually be able to hear a lot better in there. I've got two-way communication with TalkBack, just like I would have in the studio. And yeah, I think it was just born out of a half joke, but a full necessity of needing sort of a mini tour bus. And my partner and I play in a band with her called Harley Livia. And so we use the bus now as our tour bus on the road. And we often will finish vocals for like songs that are upcoming that we're sort of like in a pinch to finish, guitar parts, like just anything we need to do on the road. And it really is just a way for me to be a lot more productive these days than always just kind of being strapped. The only thing I wish it did was it drive itself. because then I could just work in the studio and then it would just, it would do its thing.
I mean, there is self-driving Ubers out there, so I mean, in due time, Zig, it's coming.
Maybe in another 10 years, that might be cool. We'll see.
But also, throughout your time in the music industry, you work with hundreds upon hundreds of amazing artists. If we were to go through every single individual and band, we'd probably be here till the early morning hours of next week. But one of the biggest bands that you actually worked with was actually by the name of Kitty, which you've done multiple projects with them. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us a bit more about your relationship with that band. And of course, what is it like just working alongside them throughout all these years?
Yeah, I first started working with them as an assistant to Garth Richardson, Garth, on the Oracle record in summer 2001. We did that for 3 weeks, and I was at that studio, so I was sort of the de facto assistant to the project, and the whipping boy, so to speak. But that was really, really cool being involved with that and watching Garth work, and it was it's a great studio that we were at that I worked at called EMAC. There was a lot of really cool things that sort of fell in place after I moved on and I did all the other things in my life, like built the studio. I think the studio was around for maybe a year and a half ish, sometime in 2007, I think it was. And I got the call that that Kitty was wanting to do a new record at that time. And they knew that I had built the studio, and there was some connections through another band, and yeah, we met, and that the first record I did outside of all that was here, and that was the In the Black record in 2000. It was actually done in 2008, but the record didn't get released because the band signed a deal with E1, so it didn't actually come out to the following year, 2009. And yeah, after that, I did another full length with them. We did a bunch of live stuff. There were lots of singles and one-offs. Yeah, I've had a long career with the band, and they're an awesome band. They're great songwriters. They are definitely amazing musicians. Yeah, it's been a cool ride with them over those years.
And another great opportunity that you actually landed while working alongside Kitty was actually being a part of the Saw 6 soundtrack. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us a bit more about that opportunity. And of course, what was it like just, putting your own twist on such an iconic horror movie series soundtrack?
I wish it was cooler than that, but E1 at that time was licensing music for various artists that were on the label for various films because they have a whole division to do that. And so they actually used one of the songs off that first record that I produced for the band. I believe it was Cutthroat that they used, and it was placed into the soundtrack. So, with sort of sync deals like that, sometimes they can be brand new songs that are specifically written and produced for a soundtrack. They may actually have a very iconic place in the song and lyrically even be written specifically for a scene. In this case, that wasn't that at all. It was just a song that was taken off the record and licensed for the film. But it's still really cool having been involved with the soundtrack, obviously. I don't do a lot of work where we specifically write songs for a scene. I would like to get a little bit into that kind of work, though. That presents a whole new set of challenges itself, because I can imagine it has to go through so many levels of, people working on the film to be approved, and everyone would want changes. It's a lot easier to get an already existing song that's completed and finished licensed into a film. And sometimes there's happy accidents where the film lyrics or the song lyrics actually fit specifically for a movie or a scene or the end credits, or I would say one of those is probably the Get Loose by the Salads as an ending credit. It really kind of worked well for Eurotrip. But yeah, I mean that's the magic of people who work in sync, though. They have that vision and they seek out music, and there's a reason why that's a whole entirely different position in the industry, working in sync and placing songs.
Well, hey, I got to say, Zig, at least you didn't get a call from Jigsaw asking if you want to play a game. I mean, that's a bonus. But also in 2013, you won a Juno Award for Metal and Hard Rock Album of the Year, where you produced and engineered Woods 5, Gray Skies, and Electric Light. I was wondering if you can actually tell us a bit more about that night at the Juno Awards. And I have to ask, man, because I'm pretty sure people watch these award shows and probably think about it and go, do they really know if they've won beforehand, or is that entirely a surprise?
So it is definitely a surprise. So that record specifically, I was connected through Kitty, actually, and that's how I got that job. And we did that record in the summer of 2011. So that was actually finished quite a long time before the Juno win. But there were some complications before the band actually went out on tour for that record in early 2012. The singer tragically passed away. And so it was another almost a year before the record, I think, actually even fully came out, and may have been 6 months or so. But the band never ended up touring that record, obviously, because having lost the main core songwriter and the vocalist was quite tragic for everyone. When it came time to the next spring, I think I was told about the nomination for the Juno somewhere in January. I think it would have been January 13. More sadness ensues. My dad at that time was very, very sick and continued to be sick for a number of months. And when the Junos were happening, I believe they were in Regina that year, if I'm not mistaken. So we had actually planned to fly out, but my dad was sort of nearing the end of his time in the hospital, and I decided to stay behind. So I didn't actually get to go to the awards ceremony, and nobody knows, before the win happens whether they win. It was a surprise to all of us. I completely and fully did not expect that record to win that category, which, by the way, that was the first year that category actually was in existence, was 2013, which was very cool to have that happen. But I sadly did not get to go. I had to stay behind, and I watched it on TV and watched them win. And I watched Dave's mom go up, Esther, and I watched Joel go up. So it was just kind of like, oh, cool, we won. Okay, I better focus on my family stuff now. So yeah, it was just kind of bittersweet, really, in the end, But yeah.
I do want to say my sincere condolences first and foremost. I hope they at least mailed you your Juno in the mail, because
they sure did, and it's on my wall. I even got like the nomination letter, and there's a bunch of things hanging on the wall out there with the other albums. So yeah, it's definitely cool to see that. And of course, people that know what that award is, and they come into the studio, they see it, they go, "Oh wow, this is neat." If they didn't already know, yeah.
And that's right. That right there is why yesterday's price is not today's price. And yes, I just pulled a fat Joe, but the moment you win that Juno, the prices need to at least double, 100%.
I wish that were the case in this business, but a lot of things, everyone has a card rate that they would fire off to their, to various labels and things. And then you've got to, for labels and for major label bands and that kind of thing, of course, you have to have a specific rate. But then there's the indie bands that are like, we have like $12. What can we do? And I generally try to listen to everything that comes my way, because I don't know what's going to go huge, what's going to do well. And I would hate to be like, sorry, you guys only have $12, but your songs are really good and I dig it, but I'm going to say no because I can't do anything with $12. Maybe we can make that $500, or maybe I can be involved in specific ways, based on the budget. Maybe I can't be there holding their hand the entire way, but maybe I'll just mix, or maybe I'll just master, or maybe we'll track drums here and then maybe I can mix, or, so I never want to be that kind of person that's like out of the price range of people. But as everyone knows, the cost of living has gotten higher and higher every year. And of course, maintaining a facility like ours has gotten more and more difficult as well. So it sort of comes with the territory. You got to do what you got to do to make it work. And I'm just very fortunate that I don't have a recording facility in the city where the costs would be that much higher. I don't really have a staff here per se. There's a couple of us that do some work here, and we all chime in together and get done what we need to get done. But when it comes to the yard work or the grass cutting or the maintenance on the buildings or the cleaning of the toilets, well, that's me. That's why I don't have to charge even more to my clients, because I don't have a janitorial staff coming in and taking care of things and cleaning up after bands and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't think I really ever wanted the sort of like commercial sort of studio business that has to operate with a really, really, high overhead. But I think Beach Road definitely has the vibe and the feeling of that kind of a space without necessarily feeling, like the pinch of those kinds of spaces. And most of those spaces, if they're still existing in the world, I love that they're still around, but I can totally understand a place in Hollywood that can't be there anymore because it's worth more money as a high rise or a parking lot. Times have changed a lot in 30 years.
And I do know when I ask this next question, excuse me, people that are watching are going to be like, DJ, why are you asking this question? It has nothing to do with punk rock. But I find this absolutely fascinating because it shows your diversity when it comes to music and how many genres you really have your hand in. But in 2016, you had the opportunity to work alongside the late, great, legendary hip-hop artist DMX on his album, We Gonna Tear Shit Up. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us the stories behind those recording sessions. And of course, what was it like just working with DMX? Because I've heard some stories, man. DMX was wild, but also a really nice person as well.
Yeah, so the vocals were actually sent to me for that track. And the initial job came through a label that had acquired a number of vocals from DMX for various songs. And a lot of them were just little snippets and bits. And they gave me a giant hard drive and they said, here, take all this shit and go through it, find something in there that you think you can make a song out of. And so it was the first time that I was like, wait, hang on a sec. You're sending me vocals and you just want me to make a song out of this? And they also wanted Morgan Lander from Kitty to be involved in some way, which in 2016 to have, a metal screaming female on a hip hop song was kind of like, oh, weird. But I think we can make it work. And so, yeah, I went through and I scoured some things, and there was a lot of stuff that didn't make any sense to me at all in a lot of the vocals. But what I did pick out was the We Gonna Tear Shit Up track. And it was, to me, it was the most cohesive. There wasn't, there was like maybe like a bits of a verse and a chorus, and that was kind of it. The rest of it was sort of like I have to make it and create it. And so I spent a few weeks actually on that track, creating a lot of those elements and creating a structure to the song, deciding, what key it should really be in or what movements and what feeling I wanted out of it. And then, we had Morgan come in and she wrote the bridge part of that song. And it was kind of a surreal experience for all of us. And I felt a bit of a time crunch because like I wanted to take my time with it, because it was like, this is kind of a big deal. And I feel like I took really long to get it done, even though I only took a couple weeks. But it was always like in the back of my mind, like, you got to get this finished. You got to get this finished, and then it kind of came out and the label put it out on, I don't know where, a comp or just online or something. And yeah, it was just kind of one of those weird one-off tracks that was really interesting to be involved in,
Because I know X passed away a few years after that, but did he ever reach out and give you a shout out on social media just talking about your production aspects of it?
Not that I'm aware of. No, it was just I still get like royalty checks that are like it's me and Morgan and then his real name on there, of course, which I won't say in case nobody knows what his real name is. But yeah, it was just one of those another weird odd job through a label that was like, hey, can you do this for us? And of course, you never say no. It's probably why I put myself into all these like strange albums and things over the years. Even if you think you can't do it, you never say no. You just do it.
And never saying no that's what landed you that Juno and all these amazing opportunities. So
I think so. Like, and I always call the Plinko trip of life. You remember the Plinko game?
Yeah, good old Price is Right.
Hey, you just kind of drop it and it just kind of goes. You can't control the Plinko chip. The Plinko chip go where it goes, But and sometimes it goes to 0, and sometimes it goes to 5,000 or whatever. I think with inflation, maybe it's 20,000. I'm not sure. I haven't watched Price is Right in many years, so I have no idea. But yeah, it's just you just don't say no. You just There were a few other opportunities I actually did say no to over those years. One was an opportunity actually with Metallica. And it was a very specific gig, and they needed someone to work on a very specific console for their rehearsals, and came through a friend of mine, and I ended up saying no. It was like a one-day thing, and I was like, I can't look like a complete fool. I do not know how to use this giant. I can't remember what it was, like a Euphonics or something just crazy. It was a lot of years ago. So I don't always say yes to every gig. Sometimes I'm like, wow, I really don't want to actually sully my name entirely by walking in and being like, holy shit, you don't know what you're doing at all. But most of the time I say yes to things.
Hey, well, it's completely understandable. Especially, it's not a little band. I mean, it's Metallica. I mean, people's grandparents that don't even listen to metal, they've heard of Metallica in some sort. So, I mean, I completely understand what you're getting at. If you don't fully know the equipment they want you to use, you got to say no. I mean, it's Metallica.
I think if I'm not mistaken, there were actually 2 incidences with Metallica. So a friend of mine in LA had a connection because he'd won a couple of Grammys, and he was off mixing, Netflix films and stuff. And the first opportunity that came through, I can't even remember what that one was, but I had changed my phone, and I was traveling back and forth from Cat, so I wasn't using the same SIM card, and he was trying to contact me on the old SIM card, and so I missed out on 2 opportunities. The first one was that, and the second one was this live opportunity for Metallica. So the first one I didn't know about, and the second one I intentionally said no. Anyway, yeah, well, hopefully, I think it just
hopefully the third time's a charm, and the next opportunity Metallica rolls around, it will be something that is actually doable.
Yeah, maybe. You never know, right? So I think it's important to put yourself into positions where things can happen, and that's why it's important to travel. It's important to meet new people and network. Take as many opportunities as you can, of course. Sound like a dial-up modem. It's crazy. Yeah.
And also, currently today in 2025, you're as we already spoke about, you're the guitarist of Harley Olivia's band, which is your partner. But you guys are also slated to play Augusta-Palooza in Cookstown, Ontario on August 22nd. You got a bunch of brand new music actually out as well. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us a bit more about your most recent music venture. And of course, where can we check you guys out if we haven't already done so?
Yeah, so I met Harley a long time ago, actually. I produced 2 records for her metal band years ago called Anthems and Ashes. And in 2020, we started sort of like writing together and hanging out and, starting this thing that became Harley Olivia, which is, obviously the band name, her stage name, this project name. And yeah, we wrote for a couple of years before we really started laying down some stuff entirely. Dylan Furrow says, yo, hi, Dylan. Siggy. So we had a number of songs sort of like ready to go, and I think the first of which ended up coming out the summer of 22, if I'm not mistaken. Summer 22. We did a bunch of videos and things. The actual EP only came out last fall. But we've been writing a ton. We are currently working on the actual first full length, which I hope is going to be out sometime next summer. In fact, I was just working on the next single, like right before your call, because I have to have that mixed by Wednesday. It has to be completed. There's some rules for release dates these days. If you're trying to put stuff on Spotify, you have to have a few weeks, ahead to get all that stuff in place. But yeah, we've just been playing a ton of shows, lots of festivals. We officially signed our first management deal with a company based out of Texas, actually. This summer, called Dark Phoenix 45, and they've been helping us with a lot of tasks that are very mundane, like submitting to various things like festivals and grants, that kind of stuff. A lot of things that take a lot of time, and it takes time away from us writing and producing the tracks. So yeah, this has been a really interesting venture for me because I get to be a co-writer on this project. I get to be a performer live, of course. And yeah, I would say it's a very, to me personally, it's a very unique style of. I mean, when I listen to it, I just hear my guitar playing in like Curtis from the old days. I hear the same chords. I hear the same like progressions that I would have done 30 years ago as a youngster. And then it's just the like one of the literally the one of the best vocalists I've ever heard in my life fronting the band. So it's just kind of like the you know the magic pieces are all sort of together in this thing. And we do have a few different drummers that play with us for various live shows. And they're all rock stars, and they're all really, really awesome. So it's really cool just being up there on stage again in a very different way than I was in my youth, because I'm not necessarily fronting it, but I'm a huge part of the project. It's very cool.
And I got to say, speaking of cool, I wholeheartedly agree that Harley Olivia's band is phenomenal. But the one song that I really like is your brand new song that came out just last month on July 25th, Give It To Me. Such a phenomenal single. I do encourage everybody, if you haven't checked it out, stream it. And if you like it, make sure you just leave it on repeat on Spotify. Even if you get sick of it, just turn it down and let it keep playing. That way they can get paid even more.
That's usually our closer song on our set. And it's a great banger of a song to finish out on. That song is actually it's one of her previous band songs, Anthems and Ashes. It was one of the last songs that I mixed for those guys before they stopped performing together, and it was on a record that just recently came out as well, that final EP that we'd worked on. But we had been playing that song live since the beginning, and we thought, this song our version of this song, because it's so heavily baked with like synths and heavy guitar. I play it very differently from the other guys, so we kind of made our own version of that song, or sort of reinvented it. And yeah, that's what's out now. There's actually a live version of that song coming out Wednesday of this week. Yeah, so that's cool.
And I have to ask, Zig, what is next for you? Because I do know we touch base on only maybe 1% of your career here this evening. But is there anything we happen to miss during this interview? Anything else you still want to touch on, talk about, or promote? What was it got you here live on 99.9 FM this evening?
Well, I mean, the only thing we didn't really talk about was those face-to-face records, of course. And if we're going to talk about punk rock, that's a pretty important band in the punk rock world. I did a couple records with those guys leading into the pandemic, actually, and they're still touring and playing and stuff. And but what's next for me? I mean, we're gonna keep working on the Harley stuff. We've got lots of shows planned. With the new management, we do have plans of touring in the US this coming year, so we've got to get some paperwork and ducks in a row. We've also got some plans to go overseas, so we're going to do some European tours. Of course, I was born in Germany, so as a result, I can travel freely to any of the EU countries, which is kind of nice on my part. There's no paperwork or anything that I would have to get. Harley's folks were born in England as well as Scotland, and so she technically has, the Brexit status. And so there's still some paperwork we have to take care of to get over there. But the plan, I think, is to just get bigger shows, get bigger festivals. I really enjoy performing in live. I think it's a huge part. I'm also getting to design the actual live rig that we're using. And there's a lot of sort of technical things that go behind making that happen and making it successful for every show. It keeps sort of evolving as the years go on. So yeah, I think more songwriting. We did install a new console this past year. I got what I wanted for the last 30 years, an SSL 4000 series. And so I really want to focus a little bit more on songwriting and mixing and performing live. I think that's probably the future of Siegfried for the next few years.
And Siegfried, before we actually part ways here this evening, obviously I know how to follow you across social media, but for the people that know your music and might not be that social media savvy, how do we actually go about following you across all social media platforms? That way we can stay updated on all the new music with Harley and, of course, everything you currently got going on production-wise as well.
Well, my website is always the best place to find me. I'm pretty up to date with what's happening on there. So siegfriedmeier.com. Of course, the name is so unique to this continent that if you literally type me in Siegfried, spell it correctly, of course, You'll probably come across my Instagram and my Facebook and my rarely used TikTok, which I'm trying to get a little bit better with some of my online content. I'm doing some educational stuff on those various formats, and I have some things planned, but usually my website and my Facebook, Siegfried Meier, of course, is probably the easiest and fastest way to sort of find out what's happening in the world of me and Beach Road. Yeah, that's about it.
And I got to say, Siegfried, thank you so much for giving not only myself, but the radio station airways a bit of your time. It was such an honor speaking with such an amazing Canadian legend. I'm very much looking forward to the new music when it does come out. But for now, Zig, thank you so much again, man, and have yourself a phenomenal night as well.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, you're most certainly welcome, man. Anything you need music-wise, definitely reach out and we can make it happen. Thank you so much for your time again.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Take care.